Hey everyone, it's me, Rory Purdy, Principal Cloud Advocate for Java on Azure for Microsoft. And I've got a special guest all the way from Broadcom. I've got Alex, who's going to show you an incredible tool as part of the Spring extension for VS Code that uses OpenRewrite. But first, Alex, introduce yourself.
My name is Alex. I work at Broadcom Spring Tools team. Our goal is basically develop extensions for various IDs to help people work with Spring Boot applications.
And I've used your tool many times. I actually flew all the way to Las Vegas and I showcased it at Spring One, and I was blown away by the tooling though. And you know, it really helps me because Spring Boot has releases regularly. And I want your take on how do I keep up with these regular releases?
Yeah, keeping up might be challenging as new releases come out often, and people tend to forget about releases coming out, and work keeps piling up, especially if moving from one version to another requires quite a bit of work that's usually postponed, and technical debt work keeps accumulating. So on the Spring Tools team, we try to keep developers aware of new versions available all the time. So every time you look at your project in VS Code, you see the problem markers, right? That my current project version is 273, boot 273, and there are new patch version available for it, a new major version available for it, and it's right in front of your eyes every time you open your IDE. We even went a little further and showed the support ranges for your current project. So if your project is nearing the end of OSS support and commercial support, you'll see the markers for that as well. So we not only show you that there is a new version, we also suggest you what to do in case there is a new version, right? So one thing to do is obviously open release notes and go through what Spring developers recommend in terms of upgrading from one version to another. But there is also an automated upgrade to, let's say, boot 3.2 in this case, provided by OpenRewrite recipes. So this upgrade will not only change your version in the build files, it will also adjust the property files and make your Java code or your source code compliant with Spring Boot 3.2. So that's a quick summary how we approach it from the Spring Tools side.
Yeah, that's going to help me a lot though. But you promised me, Alex, a interview with OpenRewrite. So you have to explain to the audience then, what is OpenRewrite?
Sure. So OpenRewrite is an OSS framework written in Java, developed by a company called Modern. So Modern offers OpenRewrite through their SaaS offering. We offer it through the IDE. So it's a very powerful refactoring framework that gets a lot of attention from big companies, and it's not even at the peak of its popularity. It's getting more and more popular every day. So in the nutshell, it works like this. It parses your project, parses your source code into ASTs, AST abstract syntax tree, something that recipes understand. So you could apply a recipe to your parsed sources. So recipe is a unit of refactoring. So typically, refactorings could be simple. Like, for example, add dependency version, remove dependency version from a POM file, add a plugin, add a plugin, let's say, to your POM file, change type in a Java file, add annotation, remove annotation, change method signature, change property key from X to Y. So there are a lot of simple recipes that could be aggregated into more complex recipes, and I'll try and show you this in a bit. So typically recipes are written in Java, but Modern OpenRewrite also offers YAML format, so you don't need to know anything about Java really, and you could compile lists of recipes, using Java recipes that are already there, but write them in YAML format. Basically, specify recipe ID and some parameters for the recipe. So, for example, upgrade dependency version takes a few parameters, as you can see, and it's a recipe written in Java. And you could combine those recipes into something more complex and have your complete 3.2 upgrade, in Rewrite available for you.
Okay, so now we know what OpenRewrite does. But I'm a Spring Boot developer. What exactly do the boot upgrade recipes do then?
All right, so we could try and see what Spring Boot 3.2 upgrade does. You could obviously, sort of apply from a quick fix, but this just performs the action and doesn't really tell you exactly what's being done. So there is another way to invoke your upgrade. It's you right-click on the build file, you find upgrade Spring Boot version menu icon, you click it, and it opens up the UI with all the boot version upgrades that we provide you by default. And you could see that there is a to upgrade. If you hover on it, you see a button to navigate inside to see the sub recipes. You click it and you see the sub recipes, the list of those. So obviously the first one is the boot 3.1 upgrade, and then there is a value added basically to upgrade from 3.1 to 3.2, and you can see dependency version being upgraded, Spring Security brought up to 6.2, and so on. So you could go through this, basically read the descriptions, right? Hover on the recipe to see more detailed information in the tooltip, and so on. So it's important to know that not all of these recipes will be performed on your project. They're all conditional. So a recipe looks at your dependencies or source files and figures out if it needs to run at all, right? So many of these are likely not to run for your specific project. So to see exactly what 3.2 upgrade recipe will produce, it's just best to apply it and see what happens, right? See what exactly the changes are applicable to you. So let's press OK. So it usually takes a while for the upgrade to proceed. There are many things happening. So the most time-consuming part is resolving Maven dependency versions. It does not download your jars from Maven Central, but it builds the graph of versions and tries to cache it, right? So once this is done, it will find all of your source code that needs to be parsed. We'll parse it using various parsers, Java properties, and so on, and then apply recipes and produce workspace edit. So you could see that upgrade has completed, and the files are dirty, so we need to save them all to do a git compare. Yes, so let's go to the git compare view, right? So let's look at the POM first. So obviously the 3.2 boot version for the parent POM is there. So Java went from 1.8 to 17. You could see other dependency versions change, some dependencies added for Jakarta. So Java files mostly are affected by having JavaX replaced with Jakarta. Some other changes like this one, for example, is just the best practice, right? Your variable is called owner ID, so no need to have owner ID pass variable because they're the same. So that's there as well. There are some, as you could see, Java 17 changes, right? Basically, concatenated string is replaced by a string text block, right? So this gives an error, right? Because Java source compatibility level needs to be adjusted for this to be compiled.
Okay, so if I don't want to include a recipe, let's just say it has like what you just showed me here, how do I exclude an individual or many recipes?
That's a good question. So in this case, it really applies, right? As you can see, we probably don't want this change. It's, you could live fine in boot 3.2 with concatenated strings. They're fine in Java 17, 11, and any other Java. So this change may not be desired. There are some other changes coming from best practices recipes that might be overwhelming for just boot 3.2 upgrade. You might apply those later. So essentially, we should try and exclude the recipe, and first we need to undo what we've done, right? Let's undo the upgrade that we've completed previously. Let's save all the files because they're dirty again with undone changes. Okay, and let's bring up upgrade Spring Boot version UI again, right? So we'll navigate, so we'll select the 3.2 recipe, we'll navigate inside. I know that Java 17 was part of boot 3 upgrade, so let's navigate to boot 3 upgrade. So here's Java 17 upgrade, let's go inside. And use text blocks. That's the recipe that changes concatenated strings into text blocks. So let's uncheck this. Let's go back home and apply the recipe, but without the text box recipe. So this time it should go fast because everything from Maven dependency versions is cached. Let's save everything again. And let's navigate to the owner control to the crash controller, I believe that was, and see if the change has been done to it. And you can see that it's been not touched at all, this file, right? So it's left concatenated strings, and if we go to git changes view, everything is there, right? So everything has been applied except for this change. So let me undo these changes and we'll talk more.
So that really helps me because I can exclude recipes. What happens if I have my own recipe? And can I include my own recipe in an upgrade?
Of course, yes, you can. And that's a very good question because people will be faced with this problem very, very often. So the best example of it is you don't depend on Spring Boot directly. There is a common library that's developed at your company, let's say, that depends on Spring Boot, and your project depends on that common library. So usually you would upgrade to Spring Boot 3.2, right? And then you would update the dependency on that common library, and this is the recipe you would typically write. So for the sake of simplicity, I picked a very simple recipe just for the demo purposes. So we'll be doing, you see the recipe list here. So it's a YAML recipe, and it has a list of recipes. So the first is obviously the Spring Boot 3.2 upgrade coming from Rewrite. You need to remember that ID. And the second recipe is change method name, right? So essentially in owner controller, there's a method show owner, and we're gonna replace it with owner by ID. And just to show you that this method is really there, you can see show owner, right? So now this recipe, the YAML recipe, needs to be hooked into the UI, right? So to hook this into the UI, you need to go to the settings, find Spring Boot tools extension here, and OpenRewrite category of settings, right? And here you could see scan files, right? So you could add jar or YAML files with recipes, right? And they'll get scanned, and recipes found in those files will be shown in the UI. So for the YAML, it's pretty clear what we're gonna do, right? But for jars, why jars? You might implement recipes in Java, right? And then use those Java recipes in YAML in YAML recipes, and all of that needs to be bundled in a jar, and then all of these, jar is scanned and all of these recipes are found. So that's how you hook them up, right? You would typically find those hooked recipes not under upgrade Spring Boot version, but because these are just the upgrade recipes, you would find them under refactored Spring Boot project typically, under that UI, right? Because that's where the rest of the recipes are kept, not necessarily upgrade recipes. So you could see that upgrade to boot 3 with extra step from YAML, that's our recipe. That's what we have in the display name. So this is it. You could step inside of it, and you see our boot 3.2 upgrade and the change method name upgrade. So let's select this recipe and apply it. And while it's performing it's already done. Let's save everything again and examine the files a bit. So I guess the change we're looking for is owner controller, right? So besides the usual 3.2 upgrade changes, we should find, the method rename. So yeah, that's how this is done.
That's a very realistic scenario that you just gave there. So I really want to know, there seems to be a lot. What kind of recipes are available for Spring Boot and Java then?
Okay, so there's lots of those recipes. We include quite a bit of rewrite jars, which are filled with various recipes. We don't show them all in the UI, just for the, to keep people sane. But you could obviously see all of those recipes in the UI. But to do this, you need to remove some of the filtering that we've put in by default. So to do this, you go back in Spring Boot Tools settings, OpenRewrite, and you see this Boot Java Rewrite recipe filters. So all of these filters, you remove these, and then all recipes ideally should show up. So let's keep removing these recipes.
Lots of recipes.
Sorry,
I'm predicting lots of recipes.
Yeah, so let's try and remove these and unlock the full power of rewrite. Okay,
I just want to
so now
remind the audience, this is a live demo. So if it does crash your MacBook, that's on you, Alex.
Indeed. All right. So now if you right click and go inside upgrade Spring Boot version, right, you should see some recipes that we've hidden, some dot releases for Boot 2 that were hidden away from you because we don't feel those would be heavily used nowadays. And under refactor Spring Boot project, this is where majority of those recipes will reside. And as you can see, there's so many of them that you should really go through, like not read the descriptions.
It did not crash your environment.
Not yet.
That's impressive.
Yes.
That's impressive. So we've seen so much. Is there anything like tips and tricks or hidden menus or beyond the Spring Boot upgrade from OpenRewrite that might be useful?
Glad you asked, because we initially started integrating OpenRewrite recipes into core language features in the IDE, right? So in the form of quick fixes. That was the start of it. Then we brought in all the recipes. So, in this project, we have a few problem markers, like this one, for example, remove unnecessary auto-wired, right? So we find the problem ourselves, but we use OpenRewrite recipe to correct it. So if you quick fix to remove the unnecessary auto-wire, that's an OpenRewrite recipe. There are many other best practices kind of recipes that we try to utilize from OpenRewrite. Like, for example, there's another one. Public is completely unnecessary for bin definition, right? So this could be replaced as well. So quick fix typically for these would have three options: either project or file or method. So basically, if you change, if you pick remove public from bin, method, and file, so everything in file will be affected basically. So yeah, that's how this is done. There is also another one that will manually try and do. For example, we can add an auto-wired parameter to an auto-wired field. Let's say string K, right? And you can see it's circled, underlined, and it tells you that this could be converted into injected constructor parameter. So let's try and do that. This is also performed by an OpenRewrite recipe, right? So like that. And there is obviously more of these that are available under settings. You could see under Spring Boot tools, you could see boot 2.x best practices, boot 3 best practices, AOT optimizations. these are, these would have the list of more validations that we have on top of what I've shown. So that's that.
Wow, that is absolutely fascinating, and it helps really create great flow for a developer to go in and refactor. I want to contribute my own recipes to OpenRewrite. How do I get started?
Well, it's very simple. OpenRewrite is an open source framework, and essentially you could write your own recipes, create PRs, and contribute those. So, for example, a recipe is just a Java class, right, with a visitor through the AST, the abstract syntax tree. And once you implement this, you write a test. The test hardness is really good. It has little noise, really. You just provide a source before the recipe application and after recipe application, right? And that's your test. So very simple to write. They're very open for new recipes at Modern, and various fixes to existing recipes, or parsers to Java sources, POM files, and so on. So yeah, it should be very easy. It's all under Apache license. Super easy to contribute. So yeah.
Okay, I can't promise, but I'm going to look at doing it. But I want to thank you, Alex, and the Broadcom team for the incredible tooling to help developers to refactor and to go on to Spring Boot 3, which has so many features, Java 17. And just before we leave, though, Alex, I'm going to hand it over to you to say goodbye to the audience.
Well, thank you all very much. I hope you liked the demo, and I hope you'll be using the Spring tools and OpenRewrite. Thanks for having me, Rory. It's been a pleasure. Keep in touch. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Alex. Cheers, everyone.